everybody. Welcome to the WVHuddle.com Prep Football Podcast. We've got 1 week of the playoffs in the books. We're going to look at the quarterfinal matchups across all three classes on the show this week. Joining me, as always, Gazette Mail Assistant Sports Editor Derek Taylor, and our Preps writing crew, Ryan Britt and Rick Ryan, to my left. And guys, we'll jump right in with the what happened in Class AAA in the first round. And we'll just go down the bracket. Number 1, Cabell Midland beat number 16, Princeton, 55-7. The 8-9 game, Brook came out on top over Morgantown, 27-14. Capital pounded Spring Mills in the 4-13 game, 62-7. It was Martinsburg beating visiting Greenbrier East, 47-28. In the bottom half of the bracket, Point Pleasant won against Musselman. That was 54-14. Huntington beat George Washington, 25-7. Wheeling Park beat Spring Valley 37-14, and South Charleston went on the road and beat Jefferson 28-8. And that sets up what we've got in the quarterfinals, and this is where we'll get into the nitty-gritty of stuff. We'll just start with that 1-9 game, Brook at Cabell Midland. Guys, I think it's going to be a real good game. Brook has been playing some of the best football in AAA the last month and a half, 2 months of the season, really going back to that game. I think it was Hurricane. They beat Hurricane just barely up there and kind of took that. The next week went and beat Wheeling Park and kind of been rolling since then. Avenged one loss that they had this season when they beat Morgantown last week. On the other side of that, Cabell Midland. They've just been a juggernaut this year. They've been rolling through people. I think Cabell Midland's going to win this game. They're still my pick to get to the Super Six, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be a cakewalk for the Knights when they play Brook.
No. Before I jump into that, hit me. We're going to find out how good the MSAC is this week. We got 4 MSAC teams in the quarterfinals playing 4 non-MSAC teams. Okay, this is one of those weeks that we could really wake up and go, oh, they're not that strong down here, or stronger than some have thought.
Or you end up with all 4 semifinals.
Right, exactly. The Midland Brook game, I'm going to go ahead when we do this, I'm going to take Brook.
Yeah.
Not because necessarily I'm not convinced that they're going to win. This is not a, sure thing, obviously, but they're rolling. Brook's not been in the playoffs since 2010, that old debacle with Rollgate and then them getting the Super 6 bid and everything else. And I think this year has shown what the Brook football community does when it has some talent and gets behind things and gets things rolling. I don't know that Midland is going to have faced a more physical team than it has this week. Okay, with their big receiver, Brook has a couple of big receivers. Thomas Cole on one end, and I can't remember the kid's name on the other side. They're both 6'4", 6'5". I know Cole's 6'5". Green, that's right. The green kid on the other end. They're both 6'4", 6'5". That can pose a lot of problems. People want to say, "Oh, Midland can't defend a pass." Or Midland has seen teams that can throw. GW can throw.
Yeah, GW can throw. Capital
can
throw.
I think the combination
can throw.
Exactly. I think the combination of physicality and Brook and their size advantage gives Brook more of a chance than a lot of teams do against Midland. And historically speaking, Midland hasn't even made it to the semis a whole lot. This is a stumbling block usually for them. So I wouldn't be shocked at all to see Brook win this game.
You have to go back to the South Charleston game, which was, week 4 or 5, for the last time Midland's even been tested.
Yep.
You look at the battles that Brook's been in since then, and I think that's an advantage for Brook, too. At the same time I'm taking Midland. I saw that game, that first-round game last week, and they shouldn't have played it. It was over.
Right.
Yeah, and for Princeton, they played 4 out of the top 5 AAA schools in the state, and their coach was joking, we're just going to stop by Lately and play Capital tonight when we're done, so we complete the top 5. But
and Princeton got in at 5-5, right? They lose that game, they finish under 500. That's rough for a playoff team.
They get out of the MSAC, and they probably have a tougher schedule now than they did when they were in it, which is kind of funny. But I'm with you. I think this is a close game, and if Midland can find a way to survive this, it's going to be huge moving forward because they're going to get tested this week.
I can hear what you guys are saying about that, and I'm thinking that it could be a close game, but to go out and pick Brook, I don't know, I wouldn't do that.
I'm not laying money on it, so I can go ahead and do it.
There's no denying nobody's played a tougher schedule than Brook. It was like 7 playoff teams in Ohio and West Virginia, but they didn't beat all of them. They didn't beat maybe half of them. So I think there's a fine line between, yeah, you're being tested every week, but you've got to cross that line and beat some of those good teams. And I think Midland kind of upped its game from the middle of the season on. It had the 2 close calls with South Charleston and Capital, and then it just kind of toyed with Huntington a little bit, and Parkersburg, when the starters played a quarter and a half. They have kind of elevated their game since the midpoint of the season. I think they're still in a roll.
Even the teams that Brook, even the teams that Brook played that weren't playoff teams, like John Marshall, that was a good team.
Hurricane.
Hurricane was okay. 5-5, so.
The thing that really intrigues me, I was trying to figure it out Sunday at the playoff meeting, and you just don't have time. So, hey, Ed Forshey, if you watch this, crunch some numbers for me, get back to me. I'm wondering if after week 2, now Brook started out 0-2, losing to Huntington and Morgantown. If after week 2 forward, Brook might be the number 2 team in the state in playoff rankings. If we all start in week 3 to today, Brook might have the 2nd seed.
I don't know how they wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean.
Well, points undefeated, but the teams that Brook beat.
Exactly. Yeah, so
They
I
didn't
mean.
beat any 0-10. Well, the University was the only team that wasn't at least 500.
That's a real misleading number 9 seed.
All right, we'll move on to the next game in the top half of the Class AAA bracket. It's, you could say, oh, it's a big game. It's the state quarterfinals. They're all big games. But it's Capital and Martinsburg. These are teams that know each other. This will be the 3rd straight year they've played in the playoffs. Last 2 were in the semifinals. There. 2 years ago, Capital goes up to Martinsburg, and I think it just kind of got away from them early. I think Martinsburg was up, 14, 17, 21-0 before Capital really had time to do much. And it ended up being a close game at Martinsburg 1 before they went on to win the state title. Last year down at Laidley Field in Charleston, shoe was kind of reversed. It was the first time somebody had really beat on Martinsburg in a long time, especially a team from West Virginia. And Capital kind of used that as a springboard and went in to win the state title the next week against South Charleston. We were at that game last year in the semifinals. There was a lot of talking. There was a lot of chirping. And not just the players. It was the fans. It was the coaches. I think the cheerleaders got in. I mean, everybody was upset. If you were in blue, you weren't happy with the people in orange, and vice versa.
Doug Card.
Yeah. Everybody at Laidley Field was mad about something. Maybe Doug. I don't know. Probably. I don't know. But anyway, so this year, the sense is that these teams are kind of down a little bit, I think. Capital is not playing at the same level that Capital did last year, obviously. And Martinsburg started out 0-2, the first time they had lost 3 games in a row, again, in a long, long time.
Since 97.
Yeah, they've been rolling since then. But, Ryan, you've seen Martinsburg, and in our conversations, you kind of reiterated that point, that you don't think Martinsburg is what Martinsburg has been the last 10 years, 5 years, whatever you want to call it.
East was in that game last week, too.
Yeah, they were. It's a long trip to make from Martinsburg to Capital to play on Friday night. I was a little surprised by that, too, that they picked the Friday night game. How do you guys see this one going? Because I wavered when I was going through and just filling out brackets to kind of just get a sense. I think I put Martinsburg down at first, then scratch it out and put Capital. I think that was the only one. I had it scratched out 2 or 3 times. I'm not quite sure which Capital team you're going to get, and I'm not quite sure which Martinsburg team you're going to get.
Okay, well, no, I like what you said, that this isn't really the Martinsburg team you've seen for the last 5 or 10 years, but this might be a Martinsburg team that you saw in the early 2000s. They're throwing the ball a lot, and they're racking up a lot.
Brandon Barrett?
Yeah, I mean, this is more reminiscent of those kinds of offenses, and I think the sentiment is generally that they're a year away from being back at that level. I think they're still dangerous. Capital has to come in purely focused and be ready to play, or it's going to get bounced.
I think Martinsburg starts 8 sophomores. You're right. In a year, this conversation's going a lot different. But at home, first, let's just pray the game happens. Last time I tried to see Capital. So,
Oh, that's right. You're getting your first look at Capital in several years after sending you to all corners of the
last
state.
time I saw Capital, Pratt was a freshman, so.
You saw him warm up at Beckley last year.
Yeah, I did see. They looked awesome, by the way. Unbelievable. I think Capital at home is going to be all right here. I think they played a really good game last week, and these kids are experienced. They know how to get there, and they know what to do this time of year, and so does Carpenter. And I think Capital's going to be okay this week.
Capital, I think the key for me in the game is early in the game and what Capital does. I think Capital can be vulnerable if it doesn't get off to a good start, if it doesn't get its confidence up, if things start to go wrong, maybe a couple penalties, maybe a turnover, maybe a drop pass. I think that kind of steamrolls itself in a way. If they get a couple things go bad for them early in the game, I think it could kind of double and triple on them. But if they break a long one, if Zario breaks one, or Kerry Martin or Crunchy Bays catches a long pass, and they kind of get the momentum going, then I think the wave could go. I could see either team winning by 2 or 3 touchdowns. I kind of hope it's a close game for everybody involved, but I think it depends what happens to Capital early in the game as to what transpires.
Hey, you've got Capital in the Super Six, so
Yeah. Well, I guess
go ahead and
I
tell
guess
us about why they're going to pound Martinsburg.
You're right. No, Capital, it's kind of like a high wire act every week. You may get
really
great
is.
highs, and you may get some pretty confounding lows.
I think what's another thing that's interesting about this matchup is that in the last 3 years, that this has really become the focal AAA cross-state rivalry, and they're still haven't met, won't this year for a title. It'll be preliminary round games all
Determine
of
the
them.
state title.
No, yeah.
Every year, the last 2 years.
All right, bottom half of the Class AAA bracket, and this is a very, very interesting game, I think, for a lot of reasons. Number 2, Point Pleasant, hosting number 7, Huntington, on Friday night. All year long, guys, we've talked about, well, someone's got a test point before we buy in. Someone's got a test point. At one point, we thought maybe that was Parkersburg South, and they absolutely tested point, but Parkersburg South kind of fell off after that, and that win did not look as good. And more than one person I've talked to that was there think that Point got away with one. That Parkersburg South absolutely should have won that game, including Ryan Prick. But Huntington is going to be that test. They just took GW behind the shed last week, whipped them pillar to post. Not much that GW can do about that. Huntington is getting stronger as the season goes on. It seems like since that, I think it was back-to-back weeks, Capital and Cabell Midland for them. They've kind of been on a roll since then. Cody Mitchell is playing very, very good football for Point Pleasant. I don't think there's any denying that. Was it 7 touchdowns last week against Musselman?
AAA state playoff record for number of rushing touchdowns, total touchdowns scored, and points scored.
I don't think necessarily that Huntington's just going to walk into Point Pleasant on Friday and do whatever they want and move on to the semifinals. We'll see you next week. Again, it's kind of like Capital and Martinsburg. I could go either way on this game. Point is big. They're strong. From what I understand, they're not super deep. They don't have a roster of 60, 70, 80 kids like a team like Huntington or Capital or Wheeling Park might have. Brook, Martinsburg, really the rest of the AAA field. But they're really good. They've been playing really good football. Rick, we'll start with you on this one. How do you see this going down with Point Pleasant and Huntington? Because I can see it going just about any of several different ways.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. I think Point Pleasant, this game really means a lot to them. They're kind of take the little brother approach to the MSAC teams that are kind of in their backyard, and I know they were fired up to get a chance at one of them here. Huntington's defense, though, to me, is about 2/3 of that team. Of course, their kicker, Casey Kessinger, is a pretty big part of the team too. If it were just down to offense, I think Point has the advantage, but I kind of wonder if either team is going to be able to pass on the other, because Huntington has thrown more interceptions and touchdowns this year, and their leading rusher had 550 yards at the end of the regular season. So
Was that Jackson?
Deion
Jackson?
No, it wasn't even Jackson. That was the not the Attaways, the quarterback, but the.
I can't remember the guy's name.
Yeah, I know.
It's not the Finnegan kid.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to call shenanigans on myself
Yeah.
there. But I saw Cody Mitchell last week, and he's impressive. He's not a breakaway speed burner kind of guy. He's more of a patient runner, tackle breaker, follows his blockers. The most impressive run he had was a 67-yarder. He was headed out of bounds at about the 30, and I think 9 out of 10 guys probably would have gone out of bounds, but he broke it back, and there were a couple defenders there, and he just leaned his shoulder into both of them, ran over those 2 guys, met another guy at the goal line, and dragged him in. And that showed me a lot about his toughness. He could have easily walked out of bounds because he knew he was going to get the ball in the next carry, but he wanted to make the most out of that one. I'm going to take Point Pleasant just because I think they've got a little more to offer than Huntington, especially, if Huntington can get them to play their game where it's field position and defense, Point makes a mistake or 2, then I think Huntington. But if Point can avoid that and being behind the 8 ball, then I think they'll win.
The thing about Cody Mitchell, I've seen him twice this year. You could switch him and Dylan Tonkery's jersey around, and they're the same player. I mean, they look
Right.
exactly the same. They're just huge, and like Rick said, they run over people and they break tackles. Shame on me because I've doubted Huntington all year. I picked GW last week. I don't know how many times I picked against them, and they just keep winning games. I mean, I think the job defensively Billy Seals does is pretty outstanding, and pretty clearly, I think he's the best defensive coach in the MSAC. But I'm with Rick here. I think this is, after a couple years of knocking on that door of a semifinal win, I think this is Point's time to get there this year. They ended up, to me, and you guys can, voice your opinions here. Their half of the bracket, to me, is much better for them than the top half would have been.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think GW would have been a much worse matchup for Point because of their ability to throw the football. But like Rick said, with Huntington's limited offensive ability, and I just think Mitchell, and don't forget Grant Safford.
Yeah, their
one's
Point's not a
mentioned him.
one-man team.
Yeah, he's a really good back and a really good 1-2 punch, and I just think one of the two of them break a couple. Maybe it's a little bit more low scoring, say like 23 to 14 or something. But I think Point gets this one and finally makes that next step.
I think this Point Pleasant team is Bridgeport 2009 that made it to the semis and lost to SC.
Okay.
And gave SC its best game in the playoffs, as a matter of fact. And it's like, they had West Humphrey at that point.
Yep.
And everybody always forgot about Alex Sutton, who actually ended up winning the Huff Award as the best defensive player in the state. I agree with most of what Rick's talking about. I mean, those are my reasons. I think that Huntington's won offensively with a lot of smoke and mirrors this year. And, they've thrown more, but other than to Deion Jackson, not that efficiently. And I think Point Pleasant has a physical and disciplined enough defense that they'll keep it from really hurting them.
Last game in Class AAA before we move on to what happened in AA last week. The 3-11 game, Wheeling Park hosting South Charleston on Friday. Yeah, I think this is kind of a, just the way that I saw it play out, I kind of thought the winner of this game has a real good shot at being the one that goes to the Super 6 from this half of the bracket. But, these are two really good teams. Again, I've said that about all of this, all four of these games, but Wheeling Park, I mean, what can you say about running back Savion Johnson? He's just been one of the best players in the state all season long, just eating up yards, eating up teams, scoring touchdowns. South Charleston, they struggled a little bit. They got the 11 seed, they came in with 3 losses, but they're getting right at the right time of the year. And we saw this a little bit out of South Charleston last year, coming from the lower half of things to get to Wheeling Island Stadium for the state championship game. Kentrey Greer isn't having the season that he had last year as a quarterback. It would have been next to impossible for him to do. I believe 50 touchdowns. That was crazy numbers he had last year. But he's picked it up on the defensive side, though. He's had to guard against Christian Johnson, the receiver from Jefferson, last week. Jefferson didn't do a whole lot on offense. Had to guard against Drew Bowen, the receiver from George Washington, 2 weeks ago in the regular season finale. One catch. I don't think a whole lot gets made about this South Charleston defense, and Greer especially on the defensive side of the ball. But they're playing really good. Perkins has been great as a running back for them. I think South Charleston's going to go up and win this game, but it's going to be a great one.
This is the same situation, not with the team, but South Charleston had to go and play a 3 seed on the road last year when they went to beat University in the quarters. Not that big of a difference of a trip in terms of time or anything. On turf, like they like it, even though they play their home field on grass. But I think we've all talked about it. A healthy South Charleston is not a number 11 seed. They're a top 4 seed, and we all pretty much agree on that.
And in preseason, they were number 2.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And all 11 of us in our Gridiron Gurus picked South Charleston to beat Jefferson on the road last week. I mean, we had to look like a bunch of homers. I was talking about this before the game. We were all right, and it's because we know.
It wasn't close.
No. I realize that Wheeling Park is more physical than it's historically been noted for being. I know that Savion Johnson, in my opinion, is a top 3 to top 5 Kennedy Award candidate. I know Elijah Bell is a really good wide receiver, and that Cross Wilkinson, the sophomore quarterback, is really seen by a lot of people, not just in Ohio County and the surrounding area, but as the next big thing for West Virginia State quarterbacks. I still don't know that they've got the experience, even though that they're playing at home. I don't know that they've got the athleticism all the way across the board to get past South Charleston here.
South Charleston seemed
I'm
physical
gonna,
before.
yeah. I'm going to pick South Charleston here. I think it's going to be close. I think this is the best game of the quarterfinal round. And I think Ryan and I
All classes?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I think this is the most exciting game.
This is the big. You talked about flip-flopping games. This is the one I couldn't decide right here. Now, I don't have a feel on this game at all. I took Wheeling Park because of home field advantage, and that's it. I don't really. If South Charleston goes up there and wins by 30, it wouldn't shock me. If Park wins, it wouldn't. Anything that could happen in this game would not surprise me. But I do think it's going to be a really good game. You guys all mentioned the reasons why, so there's really, not much. I will say South Charleston is peaking. I think we can all agree there, and they did this last year. So,
The upperclassmen on this South Charleston team went up to Wheeling Park and lost in the first round of the
Right.
playoffs 2 years ago. So they went to Wheeling for the state championship last year.
Right.
So they've made this trip to this stadium before. I don't think there won't be any sort of like wide-eyed spotlights on them now
No,
sort of
Donnie-
thing for South Charleston.
Donnie told me that they're basically following their regular routine to win. It's just not for the Super 6 this week.
Yeah, it's nice to have a routine.
Yeah.
You want to win, going through. Yeah, just like you said, they met 2 years ago, and I can't recall the score, but it was not a one-touchdown game.
No, Park
Park-
beat them pretty handily,
Yeah.
but they were impressive enough to, I think, the writers up there were like, oh, watch
Yeah,
out.
they could move the
Yeah.
ball.
Well, that's when South Charleston was loaded with sophomores.
Yep.
These guys are all seniors now, and they're kind
Right.
of seeing what happened.
Yeah, South Charleston, saying all year they'll be dangerous when they get all their receivers back. At one time they had their top 4 receivers were all down. Of course, you have a senior quarterback, Kentre Greer, if you don't have any of your top receivers.
Right.
Makes it tough. Now what do when they get all their receivers back? Fred Crozier's back, Derek Fitz is back. They go to a more of a running game now.
Yeah.
With C.J. Perkins. So I don't know if you take film or video of South Charleston from earlier in the season, teams are going to see, passing 40, 45 times a game. If you watch the last 2 or 3 games, you're going to see Hubert Perkins run the ball 40 times a game. So you have to wonder what you're going to get.
And I think that's a really good point because their ability to shift that way to that kind of game. Because you got wide receivers hurt, and I know Crozier's a leg injury. You're not talking about a lineman with a bum elbow or something coming back in time for the playoffs. You're talking about a wide receiver who relies totally on legs and feet, right? And that's the ability to shift to a running game and still keep going while your wide receivers are getting healthier. I mean, that's almost luck, really.
Yeah. 2 choices now.
Right, that'll do it for Class AAA. We'll jump right into Class AA, reading the results from the first round. Number 1, Bridgeport beat Independence 41-7. The 8-9 game, Robert C. Byrd beat Chapmanville 42-14 on the road. Number 4, Fairmont Senior on top of Lincoln 28-14. Number 5, Kaiser beat Westside 45-14. The bottom half of the bracket, Bluefield, the number 2 seed, 32-13 over Weir. Good call last week. 7-10 game, Mingo Central, the 7 seed, 68-28 against Summers County. Number 3, Tulsa, 24, Liberty Raleigh, 6. I almost said 14, but that was their seed. And in the 6-11 game, Herbert Hoover goes on the road, makes the 11 seeds 2 for 2 so far. They beat James Monroe 55-40. That sets up our quarterfinal matchups. We'll do just like we did for AAA. We'll go down through them, starting at the top. This outside of maybe that, I guess there's a couple good games, but another one on that list, Bridgeport Robert C. Byrd. It's got everything you want. Playoff game, the loser goes home. They're county rivals. These kids have grown up playing with and against each other for years. They played a good game during the regular season. Bridgeport's kind of been big brother to little brother Robert C. Byrd, especially the last couple of years in football. But, this isn't a typical number 9 team going in to play Bridgeport. Like I said, there is a lot to this, and Robert C. Byrd's got some players. They can give Bridgeport a run for their money this week, I think.
Yeah, you said little brother to Bridgeport. Heck, Robert C. Byrd is little brother to a pair of ghosts in WI and RW. Get out and support your kids, Clarksburg. Yeah, I think this is a much, what was it? Was it 38-0 in the regular, or was it? No, it was close. That was the Kaiser split. Yeah. Okay. I don't think this is a blowout by any standards. And Ryan, you've seen these guys more than me. I want to hear what you got to say. But Juwan, both Josh Nicewarner and everybody, who's seen it, it just went on and on and on about Juwan Jones.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I was at this game the first time, and like I was telling Rick a little bit earlier, it's 34-21. Bird has the ball in Bridgeport territory in the fourth quarter. I mean, this was threatening to be a game. Bridgeport gets a big stop on downs, and Tonkery takes off the next play, and then you have a blowout all of a sudden. To me, and I brought him up last week, Juwan Jones-Wright is one of the one or two best players I've seen all year, and he probably is the best running back I've seen all year. He certainly didn't hurt that argument last week with 300 yards against Chapmanville. This is a scary game for Bridgeport. I mean, even if you talk to Nicewater now, and he's talking about the season, Jones-Wright's the first name out of his mouth. I think that he was really kind of worried about his defense after that game, and since then they've gotten right or whatever, play on words, right. But to have to see him again, it's going to pose some problems. I think Bird's in this game right till the end. I'd still have to go with Bridgeport just because until somebody beats them, I'm not sure they're going to get beat. But this one, I don't think when they saw these brackets come out, that was the second real game they won at
How
all.
many times have they met in the playoffs? Have they met in the quarters last?
Yeah.
Same thing. Well, I don't have anything to say about this game, but I want to say Jaden Hayes. That's the Huntington running back.
Right.
So my apologies to him. But
Also, when we point
we
out,
do know who he is.
I've seen 5 of these teams, not 4. I've also seen Hoover twice. So, been living in AA world all year. So,
All right, in the 4-5 game, AA quarterfinals, Fairmont Senior host Kaiser. Another interesting game at East West Stadium in Fairmont on Friday night. This is not the same Kaiser team that you saw get beat up on by Bridgeport. At the same time, you saw this Fairmont Senior team, but you saw them very early. It was week 1 against Robert C. Byrd.
Yeah.
They've got some kids that can play. The defensive lineman's name is escaping me. I believe he's a sophomore. He's already been offered by maybe. They've got, Nick Davison's one of the best receivers in Class AA, if not the state. They've got playmakers all around. Kaiser's healthy now, though, and Kaiser is a completely different team when they've got all of their pieces. Ryan, we'll start with you on this one. It's a tough one to call, 4-5 matchup. Fairmont Senior is at home, but like we said, this isn't the same Kaiser team that was playing maybe the first half of the season. I think if pressed, I would probably pick Kaiser.
I don't think it's really that tough to call. I think it's Kaiser. I saw you right now Fairmont, and I couldn't disagree more because what gets hidden in that 38-0 win by Bridgeport that I was at was Kaiser's ability to stop Bridgeport. Now, almost all of Bridgeport's scores in that game came on big plays, but in terms of sustaining a drive, maybe once or twice in the game, Bridgeport punted 4 or 5 times in that game, and you don't see that. And this is Kaiser was playing without their leading rusher, Broheaver, without their quarterback who got hurt on the first series, Hours. And I think Kaiser is a dangerous team. They're huge up front, a lot of good backs, and a great defense. I think Kaiser wins this game by a couple of scores.
Kaiser was in the Super 6 2 years ago?
Yeah, 3.
3 years
Yeah,
ago?
they lost away.
Okay. And Fairmont Senior, when's the last time it's been in the semifinals?
06 when it lost to Martinsburg and Kyle Allard.
Kyle Allard,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Yeah, I'd probably go with a team that has some guys who have tasted some success.
Sure.
Over the team that hasn't been there for a while.
DT, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, Bridgeport doesn't throw the ball, and what I think going to Fairmont and the way that JL Abbott will call that game X's and O's wise gives Fairmont Senior a shot to win. I think they get their playmakers out into the open, and I think they can hurt. I think Fairmont wins this game 10 or less.
All right.
It's a big swing.
Yeah.
I notice you keep staring at me.
No.
He likes you. He's trying to psych you out. There went Derek Taylor's phone explodes live on the podcast. Breaking new ground.
It'll be there when it's.
All right, bottom half of the AA bracket. this is a game that a lot of people around the state are going to have their eye on, as any game that Mingo Central plays the rest of the way out will be, because of what may or may not have happened in the last week of the regular season, and then at what definitely didn't happen at the first playoff meeting with no Yogi Kinder showing up. But number 2 Bluefield hosts number 7 Mingo Central. A lot of the sentiment that you heard from people when the stuff happened with Mingo Central was all they wanted to avoid Bridgeport. Bridgeport. They got to play Bluefield on the road in the second round. What advantage did they gain by dropping down to the 7th seed there? I don't know. But something we talked about before we went on the air here is that this Bluefield team isn't like Bluefield teams in the past. They might be a little bigger. They might be a little more physical. Now, they still have got speed at the skill positions and a quarterback that can get the job done, but Bluefield can lean on you a little bit instead of just having to run past you. Mingo Central, we've been over and over Mingo Central on the podcast this year. They've got guys that can play at just about every position, good defense. They're a really good team. Going on the road to Mitchell Stadium against this Bluefield team is going to be tough for them. I think I would still pick Mingo Central, but I am not as confident in that pick today as I would have been last week prior to watching what Bluefield did to Weir.
As much hate and vitriol as Mingo Central by way of Yogi Kinder has received in the last couple of weeks, I kind of think that maybe we forget, a lot of people want to forget that Fred Simon's a hell of a football coach, man. And Yogi is, 4 runner-up finishes at Mate 1, a state title. Fred Simon's won a lot of AA state titles, man. Right. And they do have their share of talent there. I don't know really how.
Fred didn't show up to the meeting either, did he?
Fred never shows up. He shows up like once every 5 years to just say, "Hey, I'm still the coach." Yeah, exactly. And whatever. I usually don't get bent out of shape about that kind of thing unless I really need an interview, and then it's just me. So I'm not trying to be all, "You gotta step through the rules." No, it just inconveniences me, so I get tipped. Big deal. But I don't know that Mingo Central, as deep as it is, has the horses, the speedy ones and the big ones, to beat Bluefield on the road. I just don't.
Yeah, I kind of go along with that. I saw Bluefield run up the score against James Monroe, and each of the guys in their backfield had 100 yards rushing, the quarterback and the 2 running backs. So, like you said, we've heard a lot of good things from other people about their line. Usually it's Bluefield just has athletes on the line. The athletes that aren't good enough to play running back or who wind up being on the line, but they've actually got some strength, and defensive line was impressive to me in that game against James Monroe, because they put a lot of pressure on their good quarterback. But I'm kind of in agreement with you. Mingo Central, Bluefield's program has been there, been to the Super 6 many times. Fred's 20, it's hard to believe he's been around 20-some years as a head coach. And Mingo Central's the one in the unfamiliar position, so usually familiarity breeds a little more comfort.
This is the South Charleston Wheeling Park game to me. I think this is the best game in AA this week. I think you mentioned the hatred directed toward Mingo Central's program over the last couple weeks or week or whatever it's been. I lose track of time. The kids hear that, and I think Mingo comes into this game united. Us against the world mentality. I'm the Tom. I think Mingo comes in and wins this game. I'm just going to keep picking against Bluefield till everyone down there wants to kill me.
I think what you're saying goes a long way, even with high school kids. I don't know how long it goes with high school kids on the road at an environment like Mitchell Stadium.
Very true. It's a toss-up game.
All right, last game in Class AA, a rematch from the regular season. Number 3 Tulsa hosts number 11 Herbert Hoover. 2 Cardinal Conference teams. These guys know each other pretty well. Tulsa won the regular season matchup and kind of plateaued. They kept playing good football. They lost that game against Boyd County from Kentucky. A not great Boyd County team, we'll call them. But they didn't really take that step where you're like, oh man, Tulsa might be able to compete with a Bridgeport or Kaiser or Bluefield or Mingo or whoever it might be, even though they beat Mingo in the regular season. But they didn't necessarily get any worse either. Herbert Hoover, on the other hand, I thought Hoover started playing better ball just about every week as the season went on. Of course, they ran into a really good Mingo Central team a couple weeks ago, and it didn't go so well for them. But other than that, they put 55 points on the board against James Monroe last week. That's a game you were at, so we'll start with you. I would still be inclined to pick Tulsa in this game, but I think Herbert Hoover is playing as good a football as Herbert Hoover's played in maybe 10 years right now. You know, they've got everything rolling for him the right way right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's well, at least when I saw him, it was a very simple offense. It was either turn around and hand the ball off to Brody Thomas up the middle, or let Tristan Hager create on the perimeter, and he's very good at doing that. But you know, I talked to Tim Meyer, their coach, about that Sunday, and he was like, everything is predicated on Brody Thomas. I mean, if we can get that going, you know, Hager's much better. We're much better on offense. You know, that James Monroe game, they scored. James Monroe scored on a punt that sailed over Stover's head, and they scored a touchdown on it on the recovery. And basically, Hoover stopped playing defense in the last 5-6 minutes of the game. So really, that was like a 55-20 game. I mean, it's ran all over James Monroe. I like Tulsa in this game, close.
It's hard to argue against Luke Presley with the season he's having. I saw some of the video from last week, and offense, defense, special teams. I mean, that kid might not be the best football player in the state, but he might be the most versatile.
That could be a good argument. I mean, I picked Tulsa to make it to the Super Six, but I picked it based on picking Weir in the first round like you did. So I don't know now. But I think they hold their own at home. They beat Hoover with like 32-7 or something like that when they played in week 3 or 4. I think that it's a close game. I don't think like 1 point, but I think they kind of like Fairmont Senior and concert.
Well, since you won't go out on that limb, I will. I think Herbert Hoover wins this game. You mentioned the 32-7 game in the regular season. I think Hoover had 5 or 6 turnovers in that game. That was a one-score game in the fourth quarter.
It's kind of what Duke Hoover against Mingo Central a couple weeks ago, too.
Hoover can hang on to the football. I think they win this game. I think Tulsa's defense has been a little bit vulnerable weeks past. And you mentioned, Thomas and Hager. Stover on the outside is a huge weapon that doesn't use a lot, but when he touches the ball, he's electric with it.
Yeah, I saw him twice and he barely touched it.
Well, I've seen him twice, and like I said, one time I think Hager had 7 completions. They were all to him. The next time I saw him, the first play of the game, he went 60 yards for a touchdown, kind of wrapping around the option there. So if Tulsa gets 8 up with Hager Thomas, watch out for that kid because he is very fast and very quick with the ball. I think Hoover wins this. I'm with you. I think it's very close. I think Hoover picks up a huge win on the road here. Makes a semifinal.
Cool.
I think I'm with you guys on all you said here. I think it's kind of funny. Beginning of the season, Tulsa was kind of a dark horse, kind of out of nowhere underdog, and then beginning of the season. Now here's the end of the season, and you throw your name in there with the Bluefields, the Bridgeports, and they're about in the same position they were there. Just kind of like the unknown quantity, kind of like the underdog. So I'm not sure. I'll save my pick for later.
All right, that's it for Class AA. Moving on to the last one, Class A results from the first round. Number 1 Magnolia over number 16 Van, 54-22. The 8-9 game, Williamstown gets a 1-score win, 21-14 over number 9 Pocahontas County. It was Moorfield 42, Meadowbridge 20 in the 4-13 game. And last game in the top half of the bracket. Maybe the big upset around the state this week, if you want to call it that. By numbers wise, number 12 Tug Valley 38-28 over Man. In the bottom half, it was number 2 East Hardy having to come back and win 23-20 against Bishop Donahue. Sounded like that was a really good game. And then the 7-10 game, Wheeling Central 42, Pendleton County 28. Number 3 South Harrison 53 to Valley Wetzel's 12. And the last game in Class A, another upset. Number 11 St. Mary's 23. Buffalo was number 6. And they had 21. It's kind of just taking the whole of all 3 classes. Man, that 11 seed. It's the 12 seed from NCAA basketball. The 11 seed won all 3 games on the road. Sets up the matchups for next week, and we'll start like we did with the other 2 with the top of the bracket. Number 1 Magnolia hosts number 8 Williamstown. These are teams that know each other. It's kind of your home area where you're from. You've known a lot about these teams going years and years back. How you see this one going this week? I got Magnolia going.
Yeah, I'm going to take Magnolia. I'd probably take them anyway, but Trenton Tallman got hurt. The quarterback from Williamstown got hurt. against Pocahontas County, and it's a lower leg injury. Coach Terry Smith told me it wasn't an ankle.
Is he a hockey player now?
Well, yeah, kind of, yeah. It's not his ankle, it's not his knee, so shin. I'm guessing he said it wasn't broke, but it wasn't broke, but that gives me the feeling that Tallman's going to try to heal up as much as possible. They took the 7:30 slot on Saturday night, and I don't know that he makes it through the game. If he's banged up that bad and going to go as much as he carries the ball, like 25, 30 times a game, as big as Magnolia is, as physical as they are on defense, I don't know that he makes it through that game. And I hate to say that about a high school kid, but it's going to be pretty brutal, I think, on him, win or lose. I think Magnolia goes into the semis here.
I saw this game the first time it was played. Magnolia won that game 21-14, but it could have easily been worse. I think they outgained him 2-1. You mentioned Tallman's injury, and he was, at least when I saw it, he was the focal point of that entire offense, running whatever he had to do to win. So I'm like you, I would have taken Magnolia anyway, and if he's in any way, shape, or form hindered, it might get much worse than it should have been already. So yeah, Magnolia, I think, wins this game.
Rick, you got Magnolia?
Yeah, I think so. I think Magnolia, you don't get that rating number that they had by mistake. They played a lot of good teams during the course of the season, and I think this is just another good team. I go with the team that's proven itself against good competition all year long.
All right, other game in that half of the bracket in Class A, number 4 Moorfield hosting number 12 Tug Valley. It's a 1:30 Saturday game. Yeah, I had man going to the semifinals when I was just going through filling out my brackets. So this kind of opens things up for Moorfield. I think I'm taking Moorfield in this one, but Tug Valley, they played Man Tough 2 weeks ago. They obviously beat them last week pretty handily too. I mean, man had to come back. Tug Valley jumped out. I think it was 21-0, something like that, early in that game. So Moorfield might have a little bit of a test on its hands, but I legitimately don't know a whole lot about Tug Valley, so I can't say that with any certainty out of just what I've seen from the last couple weeks. Moorfield, good program, good team. They've got Will Schoonover's been rock for that team the last couple years. Everything points to Moorfield moving on to the semifinals, setting up possibly a game against Magnolia.
I would say so. Interesting things going into this. Man in Tug Valley, as Ryan pointed out last week, I've met 4 times in the last 2 years. All 4 games were won by the road team. I think that's really interesting. And Tony Kluski, Tug Valley's coach, who's one of my favorite coaches in the state, one of the just coolest guys to talk to. He's talking about the fact that he has no familiarity with Moorfield whatsoever. And, about making the trip, and he goes, this time of year when somebody tells you, you don't complain about making a trip, And I don't know, just that kind of attitude about I'm not gonna moan and wail about what a disadvantage this is. No, saddle up, let's go. And I think that's a really good kind of feeling. Oh.
Don't forget, Rick made a point to me earlier today. Tug's experience. What were
Yes.
the semifinalists last year?
Semifinals.
And
Was it Justin Kogar? Was that West Side?
West Side. I know you talked numerically. This was a huge upset. Another point about those Man Tug Valley clashes. This is the first one that wasn't decided by 6 points or less. Those 2 teams are pretty even. But having said all that, I like Moorfield too. That's a long trip, and even if it doesn't matter to him, it's still a long trip.
Yeah.
And Will Schoonover's a great player that we forget about a lot on here. So I think Moorfield wins this game.
I just don't think the Tug goes in there afraid.
Yeah. No, I don't think so either.
I think that's going to be awesome.
Yeah, Tug played 3 games, well, they were all home, so Mango Central's place last year, but a lot of those kids were playing this year, and they got a lot of experience. I see that. I'm going to take Moorfield too, but I think it may be closer than a lot of people think, just from Tug being there last year and seeing what other teams had to offer.
Okay, moving on to the bottom half of the Class A bracket. Number 2, East Hardy hosting number 7, Wheeling Central. That's a Saturday afternoon game at East Hardy High School. Number 2 seed, you don't want to see Wheeling Central come to town just about any round, any year. This might be a year where Wheeling Central gets into the state title game, and you're not shocked at all, no matter what their record was in the regular season. East Hardy had a real test from number 15, Bishop Donahue, last week. Bishop was winning that game almost throughout. East Hardy came back, got it right at the end. Wheeling Central, not so much of a test against Pendleton County last week. I know it's on the road, but I think I'm going to go with experience. I would take Wheeling Central to win this game.
I am too. I talked to Mike Young Sunday, Central's head coach. He was such a good ambassador for the game. He's such a just steady guy to talk to. And East Hardy beat Central, I think it was 60-34 in the first round of the playoffs a couple of years ago. They haven't met since. And talking about the revenge factor and all that kind of thing, and the fact that before last week Central hadn't had a playoff win since 2011, I think it was. And he's like, nah, it's a football game. We're going to go over there. And, you know, our kids are young. And just very matter of fact. And trust me, that's a big reason why programs like Central are so successful. It's steadiness. It's not making too much of one thing. It's I do think that East Hardy has a couple big threats. The Cassell kid, the linebacker and the lineman is huge. He's a beast. Every single A coach over there is like shuddering. He's got that Schoonover kind of effect. And, Corey McDonald, their quarterback, has accounted for more than 3,000 yards this year. And, even Young was like, we have to figure out a way to contain him. I think it's a challenge. I do think Central pulls this one out, though.
I agree.
Yeah,
For all the reasons you just said.
I agree too. I think Central has proven that it has the experience in its program, even though they haven't had a win, like you said, in the playoffs since 2011. You got a good, stable coach and an experienced coaching staff. I think they'll be able to find a way to come up with a game plan that'll work.
Oh, whatever, you homer.
Rick was over there smiling when I was talking about Wheeling Central, the positive things he said.
They weren't any good when I was there. That's the problem. They saved it for when I left.
All right, last game that we'll do, is the last game that we haven't done yet, is number 3 South Harrison hosting number 11 St. Mary's.
It's always the last place you find.
It really is. South Harrison, like we mentioned, just kind of walked over Valley Wetzel 53-12. St. Mary's, it looked like they were going that way against Buffalo. They jumped out to an early lead. Buffalo was having, I was at that game. Buffalo had a hard time stopping anything St. Mary's was going to do. And then the second half comes around, and it's like, St. Mary's didn't score any points in the second half. They had to hang on at the end. Buffalo was driving down to it. They scored to make it 23-21. St. Mary's got the ball. We're driving to kill the clock. Got stopped at midfield on 4th down. Buffalo had the ball back and just couldn't get it in. And, there was a minute and a half, something like that left. Another minute and 2 minutes in that game, we might be talking about, South Harrison and Buffalo this week. I'm going to go with South Harrison. I would have taken South Harrison anyway in this matchup, but seeing what St. Mary's did in the second half last week, I did not get a good feeling about them going forward.
Yeah.
And it's a rematch game, correct? From the regular
Yeah.
season?
South Harrison beat them in St. Mary's the week after Magnolia beat St. Mary's there. So I don't know how much of that was hangover for St. Mary's because they hadn't lost in the regular season in 3 years. They had never lost at their new field before. I got a feeling there was a lot of, glum kids that week. That said, South Harrison is 10-1 now, and a pretty good football team, and they're playing at home. This is only the second time in school history that South Harrison has played 2 playoff games at home in the same year. The other time was 10 years ago this week against St. Mary's. Go figure. And St. Mary's put one on them. I was there, and it was really cold.
I like what you said about the timing of that game.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm taking St. Mary's. I think you go out, with all your eggs in one basket against the number 1 team in the state. You kind of get handled a little bit. The next week can kind of creep up on you. South Harrison's not a traditional power by any means. But, St. Mary's, I think, we keep talking experience. Super 16 last year and had a 20-0 lead after 1 quarter in the title game, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
Yes, they did.
And now they lost.
It was cold then, too.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
They lost a lot of kids from that team, but they also got a lot back, and they also have Jody Moat, who knows how to get them there, obviously. I just think that whole 11 seed thing, I'll pick the second one I've picked this week. I think St. Mary's wins this game in a close one.
I'm kind of leaning towards St. Mary's myself. They played 4 postseason games last year. South Harrison, not a lot of
They hadn't been to the playoffs
playoffs
since 06.
Okay, so not a lot of playoff wins, not a lot of playoff experience, a new thing. Playing against a team that has been there and done that. I think you have to give the edge to the experience.
All right, that does it with the brackets. And one thing we wanted to do, we kind of went through and sort of laid out how we thought things were going to go in the playoffs last week. We got some of those things right. We also got some of those things very, very wrong. So we'll go around the table. Rick, we'll start with you. Maybe pick out one thing, one theme that you had right, and one thing that you just whiffed on.
Okay. One thing I think I had right, I think Weir was kind of a trendy pick at Bluefield, but I had seen Bluefield, and I think I'm even going to take them to win this week. So I didn't think they would have a lot of trouble. I know Weir played a tough schedule, but I think I gauged that one right. And the thing I think I got wrong, I want to apologize to Herbert Hoover, because I think all year long I have been underestimating. I saw them in the Cardinal Conference grid against Wayne, and they didn't look very good. And so I've had this, that's coloring my vision of Hoover all year. Every time they played a 50-50 game, I thought, yeah, but I saw them and they didn't look very good. So anytime they get into a competitive game, I've been picking against them. So, and again, I got that one wrong last read. Took James Monroe, so I think I'm gonna go with the 11 seed Hoover to pick the upset this week at Tulsa.
Ryan Pritt?
Well, since he was right on Weir, I guess I was wrong on Weir. But, since we've already brought that up ad nauseum, I'll say I apologize again to Huntington. I mean, I've kind of been against them in a lot of close games this year and been wrong a lot. Like I said, I still think they're getting beat this week, but, they handled GW pretty well last week, and I thought GW might win that game. So, congrats to Huntington. The thing I got right, and I'll just focus on a player, Juwan Jones right, 300 yards in the first half. Or not the first half, the first round. I kind of brought him up last week, and I think I said last week that Bird would win that game pretty handily, and they indeed did that. So I'll keep backing my boy Wright over there, Jones Wright over there.
For me, things I got right. I did pretty well picking some of these games last week. I think the only game I missed in AAA and AA was GW Huntington. We talked about how that could kind of be a coin flip game, so I'd pat myself on the back for that. But what I got wrong, man. Class A, just did not get a whole lot right there. I picked Buffalo on the show last week to go to the Super Six. In fact, I was at that game, like I said, and on the sideline there was a player that got hurt, so there was kind of a lengthy delay, and both Ethan Burgess, the Buffalo quarterback's dad, and Mike Sawyer, the coach at Buffalo, came up to me and were like, "Hey, you're Tom." I'm like, "Yeah." And they were like, "Sorry, man. we wanted to do it for you." And so, kind of whiffed on that one. Didn't do too great in the rest of the field, but yeah, it is what it is. Sometimes if you're picking games, sometimes you're right.
All right, my wrong. Oddly enough, my wrong, and I guess apology, goes to Bishop Donahue. I said, I think on the weekend, October 30th, that East Hardy was the team, that I thought. And I thought they would come into the first round and just blow the doors off Bishop Donahue. And now I'm looking at Wheeling Central going to East Hardy going, Central blew the doors off Donahue.
Yeah.
East Hardy had to come back from 20-0 to beat Donahue.
At home.
Yeah, at home on the other side of the world, in effect. So I'm leaning with Central as a result of that. The thing I was right about, Brooke going to Morgantown. And
Not me.
I had that too.
by, I think, the exact score that Morgantown beat Brooke by, it's maybe 1 point difference.
I think it's
exact.
That's right.
27-14?
Yeah, Morgantown beat them 27-14 in week 2. Morgantown was able to go on the road. It was at Brooke the first time, I believe. Go on the road and flip it, and kind of saw that coming.
All right, the very last thing we're going to get into on the show this week, I know it's been a little longer, but it's playoff time, and I know you guys are going to keep watching, so just say hi. But the last thing we're going to do,
Pause button.
something we've talked about, well, not just this season, but as a theme throughout the last couple seasons, back before we had all the video when you and I used to record these things in our basements, is that the semifinal round was a big deal as far as Kennedy candidates go.
Yeah.
It is hard to win the Kennedy Award as the top player in West Virginia if you're not on a team that gets to the semifinal round. Now, it's not impossible. It's been done a bunch of times, but the trend this century, we'll say, has been getting the semifinal round, and we'll see from there. And there's some guys left that we've been talking about. Cody Mitchell at Point Pleasant, Juwan Jones Wright at Robert C. Byrd, I don't know if we've talked about this off the air. Kentre Greer, he didn't have the year that on offense like he had last year, but he's been playing defense too. I think he might be one of the better defensive backs in the state going right now. So he's kind of versatile there. Luke Presley from Tulsa. All these guys still alive, still with a chance to get to that kind of, I don't want to call it magic round, but get to that level where it's kind of been established, okay, you're here, you're a candidate.
Right.
Now, who are some of the guys? I mean, I know I mentioned some of the guys, but is there anybody else that I'm missing? Savion Johnson from Wheeling Park. Dylan Tonkery from Bridgeport. Though I understand he's not playing a whole lot of offense right now. He's kind of doing what they did last year. He's playing almost exclusively defense for them. Letting Anthony Bonamico do things. But I would have to look at Bonamico's numbers, but if you're playing running back for Bridgeport, you probably got good numbers. And maybe he pops off for a 200, 300-yard game and gets his name into the hat. So, the quarterfinal round, we talk about getting to the semifinals as kind of being that where you need to be. But if you have a huge game in the quarterfinal round, then everybody's watching you that weekend after Thanksgiving. So, a lot of things to keep an eye on this week. Guys, anybody I'm missing as far as maybe people to keep an eye on this round that could enhance their candidacy? Stevie Hammond from Mingo Central. They go down there and handle things at Bluefield. I think he's right there in the mix.
Devin Stapleton at Cabell Middle.
Okay.
Has a lot of
Great numbers.
Yeah. Late last night, like at 1:30. Don't tweet after midnight. It just stuff goes awry. I tweeted my current. If I had a top 5, it'd be Mitchell, Johnson at Park, Presley at Tulsa, Greer at South Charleston, Stapleton at Midland. And I forgot about Jones Wright. I would probably have him at 3 or 4 and domino it down. But those are the top 5, from my view, headed into the quarters.
All right, I think that'll about do it. Of course, we film this every week at Adelphia Sports Bar and Grill, 218 Capitol Street in the heart of downtown Charleston. Holiday season coming up. You can get some catered food to take to your holiday party. Come in, have a party here. They've got a big room. Or you can just come down and watch some games. They've got, I think, the football package, the baseball package when it's baseball season, hockey, NBA, anything you want to watch. They've got plenty of TVs and lots of tasty food and cold drinks down here. So again, 218 Capitol Street, downtown Charleston, Adelphia Bar and Grill, where we record this every week. You can find all of our high school football coverage online at wvhuddle.com. We're on Twitter at wvhuddle. We're on Facebook at wvhuddle. We're on Instagram at wvhuddle. If there's a social media and it's been brought to our attention, I've probably signed us up for it under the name WV Huddle, so just search it. You can find us. Or if you find somebody else that's already poached the name, let me know. Maybe we can work something out.
Find all my favorite recipes on Pinterest.
Haven't gone that far yet, but maybe it's something to do for next year. I don't know.
Fine.
Everything else we cover, WVU, Marshall, Mountain East Conference, minor league baseball, all at wvgazettemail.com/sports, and we're on the Twitters and the Facebooks and all that stuff at Gazmail Sports. I guess that about does it for Rick Ryan, Ryan Pritt, Derek Taylor. I'm Tom Bragg. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll do it again next week.
See you next week.